So, welcome everybody. My name is Tim Born, and I am currently at Grand Valley State University. I'm actually currently at home, but just a few miles away from the university, where I'm in the dean's office in our College of Engineering and Computing. But before then, I spent 5 years as the coordinator of our then 3 PSM programs. We've now added a fourth one. So, and this year, I am serving as president of the NPSMA. So the topic for this particular session of Ask NPSMA is basically how are we dealing with all of our requirements for our students to do sort of experiential learning when they can't necessarily go anywhere to do that. And a little bit of background for why we picked this topic. Number one, it's clearly a topic that is pertinent to all of our PSM programs. But the NPSMA had put in a proposal back in January to the Council of Graduate Schools to be able to do a session at their summer workshop. That was accepted, and so we were all set to do a session there at one of their dean's toolboxes. But then when everything went virtual, they sort of changed things a little bit as to how they were going to present stuff. And so now I've been asked to serve as one of 3 moderators on a panel with session title of Ensuring Access to Experiential Learning Opportunities for Graduate Students in a Time of Pandemic. So basically there'll be 3 of us sort of leading a discussion on what you can do and what others that we know are doing. And so we thought we would use this Ask NPSMA as an opportunity to sort of throw it out to our PSM community to ask, what are you doing? What do you need help doing? And what can be done? And so what I did really briefly, let me find it again, is put together just a quick set of 6 questions listed here. Things that I think will hopefully spark some discussion. And you'll notice me taking notes, and part of that is so that when I do this CGS session in a month or so, I've got some notes that I can take and tell them about what the NPSMA community is doing. But just as some basic questions is that, have you been able to ensure access to the opportunities that your students normally have? And if so, how have you managed to accomplish that? If not, have you had to make curricular adjustments so that you can continue your students moving through the program and graduating on time? And what are those curricular adjustments? Are there various difficulties you have encountered? Are there various worries that you have going forward? So we're in the summer session now, but soon fall will happen and we'll have a whole new group of students coming in. Are there things you are worried about that you're going to have to figure out how to deal with? Have you thought about adjusting your learning outcomes, knowing that the experiential learning may change? Have you taken that into account and said, well, we have to change this learning outcome to something else, or otherwise we won't be able to meet that for internal or external assessments? And if you've made changes like that, are those temporary ones because we're in the time of pandemic? Or are those permanent ones? Did it cause you to rethink things and say we really should do things in a different way? And so we've changed that sort of stuff. And then are there things that you have learned so far that you think could be incorporated into future semesters to make the experience better for your students? And then if there are any other questions or discussion items that people have, I'd love to have you chime in on that. So I see pretty much everybody is muted, and I would actually ask you to unmute yourself. This is the exact opposite of what we do in these things normally. I don't want anybody to be muted because I want everybody to be able to chime in. And if you have any thoughts on any of these questions that I've put up here, other questions of your own or comments, etc., please join in and just start. So anybody have anything they want to say? Don't make me call on you like we do in class.
Tim, I think these are all incredibly important questions, and I think for some kind of experimental learning environments, solutions can obviously be found easier than with others. Just to share experience I have, where people working in vet bench research in companies as well as in academic labs, and they have been really restricted to allowing only a few people, allowing that in shifts, and then those who are considered more important because due to their standing as more senior PhD students or postdocs, where we can maybe expect that their contribution will be stronger, obviously they have a preference. So we had this situation in the spring semester, as you can imagine, where we had to compromise and come up with some more literature-based or other activities to complement the part that was further hands-on. I'm eager to learn other solutions that can really replace what the sense of experimental is. So it's like expecting a physical therapist to learn how to conduct the therapy only by books. At some time you have to touch the patient, right?
So with that, so for those of you who have programs that have these sorts of laboratory-based requirements where people actually have to physically do things, how have you managed to manage that? And Judy, I just saw you turn your mute off, so I'm hoping you have something to say.
I wish I had better news to say, Tim. We have put together primarily online training with a lot of virtual. So a mix of almost like telemedicine, videos, competency-based analyses, and then it's been a matter of beg, borrow, and steal for whoever will let anybody come in for as much time or as little time as possible to get. But our university is off limits. So even if we wanted to train ourselves, the undergrads are not allowed on campus. So our grad students right now are not allowed on campus, and they're still deciding what to do there as well. So it's been a lot of creative energy on my part, and I'm confident with the group that's graduating this time, and I have to come up with something new for the fall.
And have you thought about how the fall might go? I mean, I'm sure you have, but
I have. I think the problem with my fall is now I'm looking at an entering class and a senior class, whereas now I've only had one class at the same level. So I'm trying to decide, am I going to find some happy medium and put them all into more of a professional development semester, more of a regulatory semester, less of the science semester, in hopes that we can move back in the spring so that we can separate them more on their abilities and levels.
So if I'm hearing something right there, you basically have two classes of students that need that same hands-on experience, and it's hard enough to. I remember it's hard enough to find it for one set of students. Now to have to find it for two doubles your work.
It does. It does. I think, you know, to assure them that there are others out there in the same boat is the biggest task, is remaining in constant contact. And that's key, is constant contact with the students, saying that any new changes, any new ideas, any new updates, and allowing them to have input as well as to ideas, and some of them have been fantastic, has been a lot more calming for them. I've been fortunate on my university. There's been other departments where there's been parents involved and threats of lawsuits. And so I think communication has to be the big thing that is our piece of advice for everybody, is staying in constant contact.
Thank you, Judy. Anybody else have any? Yeah, Inge, I see you put
If
your
I
finger
can
up.
just have a follow-up question. Is it correct in all of your institutions that the students also pay credit for this internship? And if so, has it ever been considered to make some reduction on that according to the lesser experience, or would this be too much of an admission of a lesser experience?
So I can say at Grand Valley, students do pay tuition for the internship experience. As of right now, I don't think we have reduced the number of hours required in the internship and therefore have not reduced the number of credits. But as we get students who need to graduate and all they're looking for is that experience, it would not surprise me if that becomes an option on a case-by-case basis.
We too charge for the tuition, and it's a 3 credit. It's called directed studies. So it gives us a lot more leeway as to what that could be. It's not specifically called internship. And it specifically states in our plans of study that this directed study could be a hands-on internship as per the student's interests and or career goals, but depending on availability and or other factors, it may have to be a directed research study. So we built that in a long time ago, and that came from my experience working with the undergraduate population where the clinical labs oftentimes would have to take time out for maternity leaves or bringing on new staff. So that's how I dealt with that one.
If I may, and I'm so glad to hear this. And obviously, you have a little bit of a security in there. We wouldn't have that. And what I'm a little nervous about is for new cohorts that will start this fall. And obviously, fall is still fully COVID fall. Depending on how this moves on, I'm a little nervous that I will be accused of misleading recruitment, because in many cases the internship is really one of the biggest incentives to join such a program.
I agree. Here is what I have been very lucky, and I don't know, Inga, whether you can try this or not, is I reached out to all of my internship sites and I said, if you have any projects that you have on the burner that could be done remotely, whether it's literature review or data analysis or any proposals, the students get the opportunity to interact with the internship site. And that is better than nothing at all. So they're still making that network connection, even if they're not hands-on. And we're still saying to them, we're getting you as much experiential as we can, which is more than anybody else in COVID world right now is getting. So you're still having that advantage. And when COVID fall is done, we'll try and do our best to get you more. And we'll continue to provide you as much support as we can to give you that hands-on experience. But I've reached out and we've gotten 3 projects from our sites where the site is willing to do a Zoom with the students and discuss the projects every 2 weeks. So I like that part. It's not me, it's them.
Yeah, Sarah. And just before Sarah speaks, you can talk. You don't need to raise your hand necessarily. As long as there's a break, just jump on in.
Okay, well, yeah, I just wanted to hop onto that because I feel like, I mean, there are things that I'm worried about and things that I'm struggling with, but it hasn't been quite the disaster that I was afraid it would be circa March. And I think that is largely because we don't even call it an internship, we call it a project. And the idea is you're working with someone outside of this institution, a nonprofit, a government agency, and you are like a project manager, like a consultant, proposing something to them, getting their feedback, refining the proposal, and then doing this thing with the degree of independence that the sponsor deems appropriate. So for some students, they're coming into the office, or they were prior to all this, you know, on a daily basis during a term or terms. But I mean, and I think part of this is also because we're an environmental science PSM. You know, a lot of students end up working for like small land trusts, and their value added is they're going and doing field sampling, and then they're analyzing the data. So, you know, there's already this degree of independence, and the professional networking and the professional development comes from those more episodic interactions with the sponsor. You know, checking in, making sure all the resources are in line, updating them on progress, as opposed to like being in the same building with them every day. And also, since we're in the field, so many of our students are in the field so much. I mean, we kind of had a little hiccup at the beginning of spring term where the university, it seems, did not intend for students to be doing field research, even if they were alone and could socially distance, but that wasn't clearly communicated to all of the faculty. So I think we had a lot of students going out and doing things they weren't necessarily supposed to do, but we didn't figure that out until several months later. And now we're in a phase where the university has sort of created parameters where students can continue to go into the field, provided they meet certain criteria. So yeah, I mean, I guess my point is, I think we're partly supported by the nature of the work that gets done in the discipline, but also by this flexibility in what a project is, that isn't so much left to the student to define, but left to the sponsor to define. And I think that's serving us well in this moment, at least for now.
I'd like to add that similar to what Sarah said, our capstone project is exactly that, a project. And so, you know, the question that was raised, are we still charging them the same? Are we reducing the time or the tuition? We have not done that yet and don't intend to. It's very tricky to change the number of credits because currently we are offering 30 credit programs, which is the minimum that the Department of Education requires in Pennsylvania for a master's program, you know, to be a valid master's program. A graduate program has to be 30 credits or more, and we have kept it at a minimum of 30 for the sake of tuition for the students. So we cannot reduce the number of credit hours, and it's going to be part of their tuition because it's project-based. There's a lot of flexibility. Having said that, all the students who graduated had mostly completed their projects by the time the March, you know, lockdown quarantine happened. They were mostly in the writing stage, so that, you know, we were providentially helped by that timeline. With regard to those who are working in the summer, again, you know, we have been really fortunate. Many of our students have, international students even, have landed jobs. So we're giving them curricular practical training, the CPT visa, and they're actually working in companies like Johnson & Johnson, and they're not working for J&J, they're working with CROs that are embedded in J&J. So at this point, there has not been a crisis with regard to finding them a project, finding them future jobs, adjusting timelines and curricula. The one thing we did do, which was an adjustment, because it was, ideally we like to have each student present their capstone project before they graduate. And they do that in front of the external advisors, their peers, parents, if parents are available to come, and you know, other faculty in the department. And obviously we did not do that for most of the programs. One program did an online version of that with everyone that I've just named. The other two programs just required the students to present their work with a PowerPoint audio embedded in it, and we've just kept it in our archives. So we viewed it, but we did not, because of logistics, we did not have them present in front of everybody. So at this point, we've not had issues, but obviously this conversation is making me very alarmed as to what next year will look like.
I was thinking as you were talking, Seema, that, and Tim as well, one of the resources that's been helpful on our campus has been our career services department. They have a really good graduate section, and they've been helpful with ideas on using some of their contacts for the community, for helping us put together some video training for professional development and leadership management, negotiations, those types of things that we all as programs have. So perhaps at universities that are looking for alternatives than their typical norm curriculum, maybe that might work. And then the other thing I've had to do is reach out to our registrar's office so that the courses that we typically teach are 1 or 2 credits that's a mix of online training and then the wet lab training, and it's in 1 semester. Well, I'm proposing for fall will be online training in the fall and then wet lab training in the spring. But how will the registrar allow me to split those credits and allow overlap of the same section? So that's a little bit of a paperwork nightmare, but they've been pretty flexible. So.
And you do incompletes in that situation, Judy? I mean, I know it's not ideal, but.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they are going to wind up. I let them know that that doesn't make me happy to do it that way, because I'd like to give the students the option of doing just the online if they want to. So for a 2 credit, they could do the online and then for 1 credit and do the wet lab for 1 credit. So I think I'd rather do it that way than giving it incomplete. You never know if a student might have to leave. That's not fair to them.
Right. We've done something along these lines. This is our undergraduate engineering curriculum. They completely revamped the first year curriculum and took a 3-credit class and made it a 1 and a 2-credit class. And until they could get it all approved, they had to put these in as general numbers. And so our 180, our 180 number can be used for anything. And so they created all these 180 sections, 1 for 1 credit, 1 for 2 credit. And then once everything gets approved, those will change to the actual numbers. And so I don't know whether you have sort of a catch-all number like that you could create classes for.
That's what we're hoping the registrar's office will come up with. So
Gotcha.
We're still pondering.
I was going to say, I didn't think my solution was so novel that you never thought of it.
No, it's not up to me. I'm just asked them to find something that will work that doesn't involve an incomplete. So.
Yeah.
So I wanted to chime in a little about what we do, and we do something very similar to what Judy does, but we noticed this about 5 years ago that some folks couldn't get internship. So we started getting projects from companies, but really built it up as its own thing, and we call it an externship. We go to a lot of companies. We run anywhere from 10 to sometimes 20 company projects, and we run it like a class. So it's almost, when you think about a true internship and a student joins an internship, you know, there could be possibly a lot of interns at the company, and the company runs events for these interns as well as them working at a project. That's on the formal internship projects, like for big tech companies. And so that's what we do is we collect all these little projects, but then have, you know, other lectures around design thinking and did you talk to your boss for both the students and the mentors at companies. And the students are doing a project. So it's almost very close to an internship, but it's just done at Rutgers. So there's no students traveling anywhere. And the other thing is we make sure that there's a professor on our end who are sitting at the company meetings with the students. And that forces everyone to meet. Because if you just give a project, we found that companies just sort of disappear, the students disappear, no one's kind of on top of what the students are doing and what the company's doing. But if there's an adult babysitting the project, then the company's meeting and the students meeting, and the company isn't taking advantage of the student by giving the student busy work. and the students are showing up. So if they don't show up, the professor gets on their case. And we've been doing this for a long time now, 5 or 6 years, and have a lot of students doing it. And you know, it is not the same as an internship, but it really can be done. And it looks like every school is going to have to do this more formally, just in case.
So, Deborah, did you have problems then in March when everybody had to
Nope.
go home? Your students were allowed to continue to work on it?
Yep, because they're not working. They're working from it was always remote. They never visited the company never visited us. All the meetings were done on whatever platform the company used. Zoom, Slack, WebEx,
Right.
you know, whatever they wanted to do it, that's what they were doing. That is the only problem with the course. We can't get a standard. So that
But
is what it is.
did the students have to physically get together to work on a
Nope,
project, or could
nope,
they be remote from each other too?
they
Okay.
always were doing, because everything else was remote. They were
Okay.
remote too.
So I'm envisioning a lab bench like project, and it's probably not that. It's probably
No.
maybe a design type project or something like that.
Yeah, it's always
Gotcha.
a design project, a lot of data projects, marketing, some really we call them a design projects. Yeah, they're not going to come and say develop a drug for us
Right.
or do these animal testings. No, you know, that's not happening.
So
Although we've been working with a lot of drug companies, but it's
Yeah.
never that.
Yeah. I think for those of us that are in these fields where we think lab bench for research, a lot of us, I think, would be good to start thinking of projects and convincing others that it doesn't have to be with a pipette. That many of our employers, so Todd Arnold, who's a big supporter of PSM, said to me, I'd rather have somebody come in who can't pipette, but knows about, you know, this theory and the quality control regulations and, you know, how to read a protocol. So research doesn't have to necessarily be at the bench. So trying to change the philosophy or the view. Now, in some cases it has to be. They're going for certifications or accreditation or licensure, but for those places where it doesn't, I like the externship, Deborah, and working as a team instead of trying to find individual ones for each student. I like that idea a lot.
Oh, so one other thing we do, we insist that the project is done in a team.
Yeah.
We put anywhere from 3 to 5 students. So it can't be one-on-one. It has to be a team project because then there's less room for, you know, exploitation. The students have to work together. So they will sometimes invent their own project, just working with a company as well, which is fine. And they have to have, there's certain they have to be a team. They have to meet at least every 2 weeks with the professor and the company mentor at the same time. You know, they all do a final project at the end, and then they have to attend our lectures that we do during this externship on whatever topics the professors want to talk about.
So along those lines, there's a suggestion that may be helpful for you folks who have an innovation or entrepreneurial enterprise in your university, which most universities have. You know, everyone who's doing research has a commercialization tech transfer type of wing. I was approached this past semester by the Blackstone Launchpad, which is another, you know, entrepreneurial enterprise that's located within Temple. And they asked me if I could meet with a company. So this company was a student-based venture that was formed on campus. The research that they needed to be done for their company, so they had a CSO and a CEO and a CFO, all students, juniors actually, undergrads, and they were developing this product, and they needed a microbiologist to come alongside them to grow this product, kombucha tea. All right, so now you know. They were fermenting tea, and they were commercializing it for different strategies of what they're going to use this tea for, and then they were making vegan leather. All this to say that one of my students found a capstone project with a company that was an in-house company. That is, they have some modest funding and a modest maker space provided by the university. And the mentor for this is, well, the students are very proactive, the ones who are running the company. So they're overseeing the project because they have deadlines and they need to see, a product developed by a certain day. So they're definitely very good mentors. But then we also have the person from the commercialization wing to make sure that all the guidelines for our capstone project are being met. So then the student completed the project and has handed it to us. We're actually reading it right now. The student hopes to graduate in the summer. But perhaps universities could tap into your in-house, commercial wing to see if some of your students can't help with such projects.
And so that actually reminds me, between what Seema just described and what Judy had talked about as far as other sort of professional skills. We had a graduate a number of years ago who was in our cell and molecular biology program and very quickly realized he did not want to do any work at the bench. That was not what he wanted. But he got an internship with the tech transfer office at a local university and did a lot of IPO or a lot of intellectual property type stuff with them, and then has since turned that into working for startup companies where he's in the administrative level now. So when you think about what can we do with our students, if you can't do the lab bench, maybe you have your tech transfer division within the university, where it would be a huge benefit for somebody who's in more of a lab-based program to learn all about the tech transfer side of things. That would give them a set of skills others don't have.
What's other interesting is when we started the externship, we thought, oh, this is great for small companies who can't really do formal internships, and sometimes taking on an internship is really cumbersome because they have to do training and whatever. But we just pitched it to everyone, small startups and big companies, and the big companies jumped on it, which was also very interesting because we just thought it was going to be a startup thing, and it was the big companies that really jumped on it. And part of it is the time. Small companies, startups can't even invest the time to meet with the students every 2 weeks. And then that's really important because otherwise you can't just leave the students, floating in the wind there. Otherwise they'll stay floating.
Right.
Another place to pitch these kinds of things, it seems to me, might be state and local labs, forensic sciences labs, public health labs. These are labs that often have needs for research projects that don't have to be done on site. So we had a student a number of years ago who actually did all of the background research for our local crime lab for how to use Y chromosome typing. It was something that was totally new at the time. And she actually did all the research for it and put together a proposal for what would be the best kind of DNA markers to use. We had another student who did a similar thing to that for a genomics company that was just interested in exploring different uses for particular PCR type tests. And I think those labs are often receptive because, again, it may be difficult for them to have a student on site because of all of the regulatory issues and restrictions. So that's something that's worth thinking. I also wanted to mention that it seems to me for students that are stuck this summer, for whom it may be too late to pull some of these things together, that there are a couple of questions. One is, how are we in the PSM world thinking about how we'll relax our requirements for experiential learning, which are a huge part of, supposedly the PSM degree. And the other thing I was thinking about is that there might be kind of science or mathematics or data related learning opportunities that students could access that they could use to supplement whatever kind of project they might be doing. So I was just thinking, for example, any group that has any kind of a CD training as part of their university. One can do human subject protection certification. One can do animal use certification. You know, many of these things are available through our universities, and they might be something that students could use in this immediate time of the summer. It's not quite experiential learning, but it's certainly a kind of professional science related training that might be worth looking into. I know that we periodically had students who did the entire human subject training, who did the entire animal use in laboratory training. Those certifications last, I believe, for 3 years. So
city is even longer, Linda, now. So yeah.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
wondering, I just had this brain idea, because I don't know everybody's discipline that I can see here, but my gut reaction, Linda, when you said, are we going to relax our requirements for PSM, was no, because there are so many resources out there for virtual learning. And then I'm thinking, well, what can the NPSMA or PSM do? And I'm wondering if we're all STEM, so we have our unique disciplines. If we had a discipline lead, could there be a page on the PSM website where we could post, hey, here's city training, or here's RCR, or here's webinars about environmental health, and you can get a certificate at the end. Like Jackson Labs has certificates out the wazoo if you're interested in genetics and genomics. There's lots about—
So do many of the statistics companies as well.
Right.
Offer,
right.
you know, sort of basic level statistical training, and you can be certified in it. I didn't want to imply that we should relax the experiential learning requirement. That I think we should not do. But I think we should make it clear to people who maybe have in the past only used in-person internships. There are alternate ways that they can satisfy that, and that we who take these applications and it tells what they're going to do and check all the things you use, that in this circumstance, I wouldn't want to see any student be denied graduation because this summer, because as you know, Judy, in our applied genomics program, most of our students did their internships last semester. Most of them did this summer. And so I think we should make it clear that people should be willing to work with students in this time, you know, to find a way that they can graduate. It's an expensive program to ask people to come back another semester so they could take, in our case, the directed studies or whatever.
Right.
That was
we've got some great ideas here today. So how are we going to get these ideas that we're all discussing to the memberships?
Well, I was going to suggest that there would be a great article for the innovator coming out of these things. Not a big, long, many thousands, but an in-practice article that would be short, 1,000, 2,000 words, and just like list some of these things. We could preview it in the PSM News. We can link to it. You know, those are things that we could do. And I was actually going to send an email to some of you and say, gee, wouldn't you like to put this together? And since Tim is already doing something for July, maybe a couple of you would be willing to work with him. And I don't think it needs to be a lot. And some of these, like the suggestion about the CD training, is in one of the innovator articles already that talked about, you know, how you could meet the new requirements and how the PSM is an ideal degree and so forth and so on. But, you know, I think there's some very good ideas here, and I think it would not have to be very burdensome to do something in practice. And nothing stops us from posting a link to a draft of an article before the innovator comes out in the fall.
Now, how about, I know Ray's not on this call, but we had set up a Slack channel, and I'm wondering how much of our membership uses that Slack channel. And it might be, I'll check with Ray to create a forum that says COVID rescue ideas, and we can post things in there. Sarah, do you use that?
I just got on Slack for the first time. My students wanted to have a Slack channel for one of my classes. So I'm learning, but I am on Slack.
Oh,
So Judy, I can tell you we have 70 members in our NPSMA Slack channel, but it hasn't been used much. The last posting is from a month ago. And it's one of those things where, you know, Ray started it. We had a little bit, and then in January I tried to push it, and we had a whole bunch of people come on, and we've had a few conversations that have gotten up and going, but it hasn't reached that organic state where people are on it all the time.
okay.
I'm on another Slack channel that is for our institution, actually our college's first year advising, because we're doing that all remotely. And that has been very active because we have, you know, 50 questions every day. And so we're putting them in there and our advisors are answering them. And that's been a really great use of Slack. But getting this as sort of to be a community resource has been, it's been harder than I had hoped it would be, but maybe if we start to push it for COVID-19 ideas, maybe that'll get more people to post and come and look at it.
Okay, I'll make a post today, I promise.
And Judy, I love the aspect of your idea. You know, you talked about writing some kind of article or making some kind of a resource on the website, but I loved the piece that was about, like, you know, leads within disciplines. I would love, I'm new in my position. This is just the end of my first year, and I would love to connect with people who administer other environmental science focused NPSMA or PSM programs. So that would be an amazing resource beyond COVID, but certainly.
Right. And Linda, that's what worries me. I love the innovator, and you can go back and read it, the past issues, but if we have new directors coming in, you know, I think a resource like that would be amazing. I know it's all volunteer organization, but I think that as we're putting these together now because we have to for COVID, not just keep it for ourselves and our university, but is there a portal in which we could share this for all of PSM?
It's interesting you say that, just because right before this I was going through our website, and we don't have a lot of the stuff on the website, so I was just talking to Jeannie to really add it.
Okay.
And so,
you know, and the Slack channel could actually be a place to keep some of this, because you can create different channels and forums, and you can also store stuff on there. So that may be an initial way to do it. And then as we have the bandwidth and the ability, we can start to move some of this over to the website. But it also may be a way to pull more people into the Slack channel if they see that there are resources there.
Yep, I think that's a fantastic idea. I think it's less work than trying to do it on the web. I think it's a nice member-only benefit to be in Slack. So Sarah, I think that you're going to love Slack some more.
Oh, I'm excited to join.
Okay.
Can I just go back to something we were talking about earlier? I don't know if it will really be helpful, but I just wanted to throw it out there, because some of you guys' conversations about, okay, how do we give students the full experience if we move to these remote projects that may not have certain components? One thing that we've actually been batting around for our Master of Science students particularly, and we haven't actually done it, it's more of sort of a nuclear option if we need it, is like, all right, previously, you know, you designed your research project, you gathered the data, you analyzed it. Now, what if we have students propose a research project based on the literature, and they can't actually execute it, but their faculty advisor has some unanalyzed data. So they do the proposal piece, and then they analyze data from somewhere else, and then they help publish the article, you know, that data informs, right? So they do the whole arc of research, but they don't do it all on one project. And, you know, I could imagine that applying in the externship world if, you know, you shift to these more kind of designy or literature research projects, but then students have faculty advisors or classes that give them like data analysis projects. It doesn't get you the bench part, obviously, but it might be a way to sort of think about all right, what is it we're trying to do? And can we break that up and just have students do it in different places?
I like it.
Yeah, I think the ideal is clearly to have a project that you can do all of it, but when that becomes impossible, you start to figure out what are our other options to make this happen. And so, yeah, that's when that kind of comes into one of the questions that I had posed on there. Have you changed your curriculum at all? And that may be an example of that. Yes, we've had to make this change. It's only temporary until we can go back to what it was before, but this is how we've accommodated things.
The furthest we've gotten as a faculty, and this goes for all of our graduate programs, not just our PSM, is to kind of have those broad ranging conversations and say, all right, we're for the next year, 18 months, going to be more flexible in how we give students these experiences, whether it's the research experience or the project experience, you know, everything's on the table, but we haven't actually made any formal curriculum changes.
Yeah. And actually, one of the things that our provost has said is, you know, she's like, we're not going to make the education we provide any worse. So we're going to maintain the quality of the education, but we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we don't impede students' ability to graduate on time and make progress. And so that requires us doing some of these flexible things where under normal circumstances we wouldn't, but we know they're still getting an excellent education. It might just be a little bit different than what we had originally intended, but it still allows this student to make progress and to graduate on time and then move on into the workforce or on to the next program they want to go into, sort of thing. So I always like that sort of a mindset as you make these decisions on, we can't do A, so what is B for us that allows us to still get them things. And like, you know, some things that Judy had mentioned, we can't do this, but we can get this person certified in this other thing, and that's going to be a huge benefit for them professionally. It's not our first choice. We'd much rather have them have the hands-on experience, but this will work.
Yeah, Linda's idea of contacting the Department of Public Health, at first I was like, well, nobody's going in anywhere, but then she followed up with external projects. They've actually reached out to the universities looking for volunteers to be involved in COVID tracing, so doing the epidemiology work. And that would be great for anybody who's in the stats programs, the math programs, in the science programs. So that's been a project for one of our students. And, you know, it's a unique twist I hadn't thought about.
Yeah. And I would guess county and state agencies are going to need more help in the future because their budgets are not going to get any larger in the next couple of years. So there may be more opportunities for our students to help out.
Right. Actually, one of the projects that we even had on the externship this year was a city in Wilmington, in Delaware. So what was interesting is the students were working with this, I think it was a county or a small city at the time that COVID hit, and then the folks at the municipal office used the students to help them update the website and do some messaging around what was going on because all the county offices were closed. So they did get interesting experience during the time. And that one was an environmental project, if I'm not mistaken. They were doing some environmental, I mean, obviously on the web or stuff, but it was around some environmental stuff that the county was doing. So.
To add on to the COVID, to add on the COVID contact tracing thought line that was going on here, and the need we may have to give students some things to do this summer. You know, Johns Hopkins has that excellent training course for contact tracing. It's 6, you know, I think they say it's 6 hours, but people have done it. It's more like 12 to 15 to 20 hours, but it's a really decent science training as well. They're like, you know, interactive sample things with students, people you might meet. So as we were thinking about some, you know, kind of immediate summer things, we could say, hey, here are some things you might suggest. And that, you know, PSM in the time of the coronavirus, that would be a really nice thing. And it might or might not lead to a job, but it's certainly, the people I know who've done it said it's really quite excellent.
It comes with a certification, Linda, which always helps, right? So one of our students,
Pardon me?
it comes with a certification, which always helps.
It is.
And one of
It
our
is.
students said it was incredibly simple. So even though
Right.
maybe the student knew already a lot, so everything is relative, but he thought it was a very easy thing to do and went right for it.
And I think it is a certification, Inga. I think you're correct. When you pass the final, whatever it is, it's a certification.
He even shared it on. He even passed it on to me. That's why I know. So he was, on one hand, you know, you have these kind of conflicted things. He was bragging how simple it was. On the other hand, he was equally proud of having the certification, which is a little bit of a contradiction, right? And I appreciate all these comments. On the other hand, while all our programs are science programs, maybe we can come up with even more examples. Obviously, the COVID ones are more in the arena of health sciences, but then again, we have also financial mathematics and others. Okay, maybe we can push them in the statistics projects, but fortunately, there is a high variety of PSM programs, and we might still have to tickle ourselves to come up with even more alternatives. But sharing those that we have found already, and maybe thinking where else could we send people as a dry project opposite to wet bench research is definitely very valuable.
So we're coming up relatively close to the hour, which is the end of our session. Are there any other questions or comments that people want to make while we have the group here? So I don't want to cut anybody off.
Is there a natural or is there an already established subsections of what our disciplines are within? Okay. So that's
yes.
on the website,
So
right?
if you go to the if you go to the program locator, you can search by discipline, and there are 6 or 7 of them. I forget how many.
Okay.
But yes, there. So if you want to make up groups, it would be very easy to do that way.
Okay.
Any other things we want to bring up while we're here? I don't see any reason otherwise to continue things any longer than necessary. So we can give you back 5 minutes of your life. If you're as busy as the rest of us are, 5 minutes can be a huge. So I want to thank you all for being here. Hopefully you found this useful. I certainly found it useful. And when I'm presenting at the CGS conference, I'll make sure to mention the fact that we had a whole group of NPSMA members who were contributing to this. So with that, I hope you have a great afternoon and head into a great weekend.
Bye, everybody. Stay safe.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.